Mama Thandeka lived in a small, quiet house on the edge of Johannesburg, a place that felt emptier with each passing year. She was a widow, her husband gone long ago, and her only daughter had walked away after a bitter argument that left wounds too deep for either of them to heal. Time passed, but the silence between them never broke. Now, at 70, Mama Thandeka often found herself drifting through the city streets, especially the crowded market, where the sound of bargaining and laughter filled the air. Yet, despite the noise and bustle, no one really saw her. She was just another face, another shadow among many. Her heart carried a weight of loneliness and regret, a constant ache that reminded her of what she had lost her daughter, her family, her purpose. Every step she took in the market seemed to echo that emptiness. She would pause at stalls, watching mothers and daughters laugh together over fruit or fabric, and memories of her own child would stab at her heart. Sometimes she wished she could turn back time, undo the harsh words, the anger, the stubborn pride. But the years had stretched too far, and her daughter had vanished from her life. What remained was silence and longing, as though the city itself had swallowed their bond forever. One evening, as the sky darkened and the market slowly emptied, Mama Thandeka pulled her old shawl tighter against the sharp chill. The streets were quieter now, with vendors packing their goods and lights dimming in the stalls. She walked slowly, her steps heavy, when something caught her eye. Just beyond the flicker of a street lamp, near the corner of a building, sat a small figure pressed against the cold wall. At first, she thought it was a bundle of rags left behind, but then she saw the trembling, the way thin arms hugged themselves for warmth. It was a girl, no older than 12, her clothes torn, her body shivering from the cold night air. Mama Thandeka stopped in her tracks, her breath catching in her throat. Something about the sight pulled at her heart, stirring a feeling she hadn't known in years. The girl sat curled up against the wall, her knees pulled tightly to her chest, her thin frame trembling in the night air. Her clothes were nothing more than torn scraps, hardly enough to keep away the biting cold. Her face was pale, her lips dry, and her wide eyes carried a hunger that went beyond food. It was the kind of hunger born from days of struggle, from surviving on scraps and silence. Mama Thandeka stood a few feet away, her heart pounding as she watched the child shiver. For a moment, she hesitated. She was an old woman with little to give, her life already heavy with burdens. Yet something inside her, something deep and maternal, refused to let her walk away. She stepped closer, her footsteps careful on the pavement. The girl noticed her and shrank back, fear flashing in her eyes as though she expected harsh words or to be chased away. Mama Thandika's voice softened as she whispered, "Don't be afraid, my child." Slowly, she untied the blanket from her shoulders, a warm, woolen piece she had clung to for years, and wrapped it gently around the girl. The child stiffened at first, then allowed herself to sink into the warmth, her small body sighing with relief. From the pocket of her handbag, Mama Thandeka pulled out a piece of bread she had bought earlier. It wasn't much, just a leftover portion, but to the girl it looked like treasure. She handed it over, and the child grabbed it with trembling hands, biting into it as though she hadn't eaten in days. Crumbs fell to the ground, but her eyes never left the bread until the last bite was gone. Mama Thandeka watched her in silence, her heart aching at the sight. To her, it felt like a simple act of kindness, something small she could do before walking home. Yet as the girl licked her fingers and curled deeper into the blanket, Thandeka felt an unfamiliar pull inside her chest. It was as if this meeting, this moment, carried a meaning she could not yet understand. Something had changed in her world, though she could not name it. The girl ate slowly, nibbling the last crumbs of bread as though she wanted to make the moment last. Mama Thandeka sat beside her on the cold pavement, pulling her shawl tighter across her shoulders. For a while they sat in silence, the night air filled only with the distant sounds of the city. Then, with a timid voice, the girl spoke. "My name is Lerato," she said softly, her eyes avoiding Mama Thandeka's. The old woman nodded gently, repeating the name under her breath as if testing its weight. Curiosity grew in her chest, though she tried not to push the child too hard. "And your mother, child? Where is she?" Mama Thandeka asked, her voice filled with quiet care. Lerato's face grew sad, and she lowered her head. "She's gone," she whispered. "She died when I was little. Her name was Nomvelo." The moment the name left the girl's lips, Mama Thandeka's heart stopped. She froze, her breath caught in her throat. Nomvelo. The sound of it echoed through her like thunder. That name wasn't just familiar. It was the name of her daughter, the child she had once cradled, the woman she had lost after their bitter fight. For a second, she could only stare at the girl, her hands trembling on her lap. But her mind quickly tried to dismiss it. Johannesburg was a big city. Surely it could be a coincidence. Many mothers could share the same name. And yet, as she looked at Lerato, at the curve of her face, at the way her eyes seemed too deep for her young age, something inside her twisted with unease. She forced a smile, not wanting to alarm the child. "Nomvelo is a beautiful name," she murmured, her voice barely steady. But as Lerato leaned back against the wall, humming softly to herself, Mama Thandeka felt her chest tighten. The name, the sadness, the hunger in the girl's eyes, it all stirred memories she thought she had buried long ago. She told herself it was chance, nothing more. Yet the whisper of the past lingered, refusing to let her heart rest. Something was not right. Something was pulling her closer to the truth. That night, Mama Thandeka could not find peace. She lay in her bed, staring at the cracked ceiling, but her mind would not rest. The name she had heard from the little girl echoed again and again, Nomvelo. It stirred memories she had tried to bury, memories that carried both love and pain. With a heavy sigh, she rose from her bed and walked to the old wooden trunk in the corner of her room. The hinges creaked as she opened it, releasing the faint scent of dust and time. Inside were photographs, letters, and small keepsakes from a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. Her trembling hands picked up a photograph. It was of her daughter, Nomvelo, smiling with youth and fire in her eyes. Mama Thandeka remembered the night their lives had shattered. Harsh words had been exchanged, anger fueled by pride on both sides. Nomvelo had accused her mother of being controlling and unkind. Mama Thandeka, in turn, had spoken words she could never take back. The argument ended with Nomvelo leaving the house, her eyes wet with tears, her hands clutching her small bundle of clothes. That was the last time Mama Thandeka had truly seen her daughter. Weeks later, whispers reached her ears that Nomvelo was pregnant. She had hoped her daughter would return, hoped they could mend what was broken. But the years stretched on with no sign of reconciliation. And then, silence. Nothing but silence. Now, as she traced her fingers over her daughter's face in the photograph, a sharp ache filled her chest. Could it be possible? Could that little girl in the shadows with the sad eyes and thin body truly be connected to Nomvelo? She tried to shake the thought away, but the pieces pressed against her mind. The girl's age, the mention of her late mother's name, the deep sadness she carried. Mama Thandeka closed her eyes, clutching the photo to her heart. Restlessness consumed her, and suspicion grew like a seed planted deep in her soul. She could not ignore it. Something told her that fate was pulling her toward the truth she had long avoided. The following morning, Mama Thandeka woke with a single thought pressing on her mind. She had to see the girl again. Sleep had been restless, her heart burdened with questions that refused to fade. Pulling her shawl tightly around her shoulders, she made her way through the busy market streets, her eyes scanning every corner. The market was alive with noise, vendors shouting their prices, the smell of roasted maize drifting in the air. But all she searched for was one small figure. At last, near the same corner where she had first seen her, Lorado sat quietly, her knees tucked under her chin. Relief washed over Mama Thandeka, though her chest tightened at the sight of the child still in the same tattered clothes. She approached gently, not wanting to frighten her. This time, instead of offering bread from her bag, she bought a warm meal from a nearby vendor, a plate of pap and stew, and handed it to the girl. Lorado's eyes widened in gratitude as she ate hungrily, her hands trembling around the plate. When the food was nearly finished, Mama Thandeka asked softly, "Tell me, child, where is your family? Who looks after you?" Lorado paused, lowering her gaze. Her voice came out faint but heavy with sorrow. "I have no one," she whispered. "My mother, she died years ago. It has only been me since then." The words pierced through Mama Thandeka like a blade. Her heart clenched, her fingers curling around the edge of her shawl. She swallowed hard, steadying her voice. "What was your mother's name?" she asked, though part of her feared the answer. Lorato lifted her eyes briefly, then said, "Nomvelo, she was all I had." Mama Thandeka's breath caught again. She had heard it before, but this time it cut deeper. Seeing the pain in Lorato's face, hearing the finality in her tone, it was almost too much to bear. She reached out, resting a trembling hand on the girl's shoulder, her eyes misting. Though Lorato looked away, the old woman felt the truth drawing closer. The child's story was not just painful, it was personal, echoing wounds she herself had carried for years. Lorato sat cross-legged on the ground, the empty plate beside her, her small fingers tracing patterns in the dust. For the first time since Mama Thandeka had met her, she looked almost at ease, the lines of hunger and fear softening on her young face. A quiet hum escaped her lips as though the meal had warmed not only her stomach but also her spirit. At first, Mama Thandeka barely noticed, but then the sound grew clearer. It was a melody, gentle, familiar, almost haunting. Mama Thandeka's breath caught in her throat as the tune wrapped around her ear. She froze, her body stiff, her heart pounding with recognition. It was the very same lullaby she had sung countless nights to her daughter, Nomvelo, when she was small. She remembered the way Nomvelo's tiny hands would curl around her own as she drifted to sleep, comforted by that song. The memory hit her like a wave, carrying both warmth and unbearable sorrow. Her eyes filled with tears as she listened. How could Lorato possibly know this? The lullaby had never been written down, never shared with anyone outside their home. It had been theirs alone, mother and daughter, Bound by music whispered in the quiet of night. Child, Mama Thandeka said shakily, her voice almost breaking. Where did you learn that song? Lerato stopped humming, glancing up with innocent eyes. My mama used to sing it, she answered softly. She said it always made her feel safe when she was little. The words struck like lightning. Mama Thandeka pressed her trembling hands against her mouth, unable to contain the flood of emotion. There was no denying it now. The lullaby was proof, a thread connecting the girl to the daughter she had lost. All the suspicion, all the unease that had plagued her since hearing the name Nomvelo now hardened into near certainty. She reached out, brushing a tear from her cheek, and stared at Lorato with new eyes. This was no ordinary meeting. This child was part of her blood, her history, her second chance. The lullaby had carried the truth across generations, and Mama Thandeka could no longer run from it. The next morning, Mama Thandeka woke with a heavy but determined heart. The lullaby still echoed in her ears, leaving her with no more doubts. She could not let the questions remain unanswered. Holding Lerado's small hand, she guided her through the busy streets until they reached a modest office with a faded sign that read, Community Social Services. Inside, the walls were lined with old files and the air smelled faintly of paper and dust. Mr. Dubé, the local social worker, greeted them with gentle eyes behind thick glasses. He had worked with many children like Lerato, and when Mama Thandeka explained the situation, he nodded knowingly. Let us see what we can find, he said. He led them to a small desk stacked with folders and switched on his computer. Lerato sat quietly, her legs swinging beneath the chair, while Mama Thandeka gripped her shawl tightly, her heart racing with every passing second. Mr. Dubé typed Lerato's name into the system and began searching through records. The silence in the room felt heavy, broken only by the clicking of keys. Finally, he pulled out a thin folder and opened it carefully. Inside were documents, birth records, notes from hospitals, and case files from years past. He read softly, his tone steady but serious. Lerato's mother was Nomvelo. She passed away some years ago after an illness. The words confirmed what Mama Thandeka already feared yet longed to know. Her chest tightened as tears welled in her eyes. Nomvelo was gone, taken far too soon. Mr. Dubé continued, explaining that after her passing, Lerato had been left without close family to claim her. She had slipped through the cracks, surviving on scraps and the mercy of strangers. Mama Thandeka could hardly breathe. The truth lay before her in black and white. Lerato was indeed her granddaughter, the child her daughter had carried when she left home all those years ago. She reached for Lerato's hand, squeezing it tightly while silent tears ran down her face. The girl looked at her curiously, not yet understanding the storm of emotion rising in the woman beside her. For Mama Thandeka, the truth was undeniable. Fate had brought her back to her blood, her lost family, her chance at redemption. The walk back from the social worker's office felt heavier than the long years of loneliness Mama Thandeka had endured. Every step carried the weight of truth, truth she could no longer hide, truth that was burning inside her chest. When they reached a quiet bench near the park, she stopped, her body trembling. She looked at Lerato, who was clutching the blanket she had given her days before, her innocent eyes unaware of the storm in the old woman's heart. Mama Thandeka could no longer hold it in. Tears welled up and spilled freely down her wrinkled cheeks as she whispered, Lerato, I am not just a stranger who gave you bread. I am your grandmother, your mother, Nomvelo. She was my daughter. Her voice cracked under the weight of confession. Lerato froze, her young face tightening with confusion. She pulled back slightly, her brows furrowed. My grandmother? She asked, almost in disbelief. If you are my grandmother, then why was I alone? Why didn't you come for me? Why did you leave me to suffer? Her words cut like blades, filled with pain that no child should ever carry. The questions shattered Mama Thandeka's heart, but she knew she deserved them. She reached out with trembling hands, though Lerato shifted away. I never stopped loving your mother, she cried. But we fought, and she left. My pride, my anger, it built a wall between us. I never knew where she went. I never knew you existed until now. Lerato's eyes filled with tears, yet mistrust lingered. The wound of abandonment was raw. Silence stretched between them, heavy and uncertain, broken only by the sound of both their sobs. Mama Thandeka wept openly, her frail body shaking, her voice pleading. Please forgive me, child. I lost my daughter. I don't want to lose you too. Lerato hugged the blanket tighter, torn between hurt and hope. Her heart wanted to believe, but the years of loneliness had built walls hard to break. In that moment, love and doubt battled silently between them, leaving their reunion drenched in tears, hesitation, and fragile possibility. The silence between them lingered, heavy and painful, but Mama Thandeka refused to let it swallow their chance. She wiped her tears with the corner of her shawl and spoke with trembling honesty. Lerato, I must tell you the truth of what happened. Years ago, your mother and I fought. I was stubborn. I thought I was protecting her, but my pride blinded me. She left our home carrying you inside her, and I never saw her again. Not a day passed that I didn't regret my words, not a night that I didn't pray she would return. When I learned today that she was gone, my heart broke all over again. And when I saw you, I knew God had given me one last chance to make things right. Her words poured out like water breaking a dam, her voice cracking with grief. Lorato stared at her, clutching the blanket tighter, her small face a storm of emotion. But I was alone all this time, she whispered. Hungry, cold, no one to care. Why now? Why only now? Mama Thandeka reached for her hand, her eyes pleading. Because I did not know, child. I would never have let you suffer if I had known you existed. I failed your mother, but I will not fail you. Please forgive me. Her voice broke into sobs, raw and desperate. Lorato's chest tightened. She wanted to hold on to her anger, to the walls she had built for survival. But when she looked into Mama Thandeka's eyes, she saw no lies, no excuses, only truth and deep regret. Slowly, her fingers loosened around the blanket and reached toward the old woman's trembling hands. Tears fell from both their eyes as their palms met. In that fragile moment, blood spoke louder than pain. Lorato leaned into Mama Thandeka's arms, hesitant at first, then clinging tighter as if afraid she might disappear. The old woman wrapped her tightly, her sobs mixing with relief. For the first time in years, she did not feel alone. For the first time ever, Lorato felt she belonged. The bond of family, once broken, began to mend. Weeks passed, and the cold streets that had once been Lorato's home slowly became a fading memory. Mama Thandeka prepared a small room in her modest house, placing fresh sheets on the bed and tucking a little doll beside the pillow, as if to welcome the child she never knew she had. When Lorato finally moved in, the house that had long echoed with silence felt alive again. Her footsteps filled the hallways. Her laughter, soft at first, then brighter, breathed warmth into the walls. Every morning, Mama Thandeka prepared porridge and watched with quiet joy as Lorato ate without fear of when the next meal would come. She mended her torn clothes, replacing them with dresses she stitched carefully, each thread woven with love she had carried in her heart for years. In the evenings, they sat together by the small fire, Mama Thandeka telling stories of her youth while Lorato listened with wide, curious eyes. Sometimes Lorato would hum the lullaby, and together they would sing it, two voices bridging the gap of lost years. For Lorato, the change was overwhelming. She had slept on pavements, gone hungry for days, and faced the world alone. Now she had a roof over her head, a bed to rest in, and arms that held her when nightmares came. At first, she struggled to trust fully, the scars of abandonment still fresh. But with each passing day, Mama Thandeka's patience and gentle care broke down those walls. Slowly, Lorato allowed herself to believe she was safe, she was wanted, she was loved. For Mama Thandeka, this was redemption. The loneliness that had once haunted her nights lifted as she found new purpose in caring for her granddaughter. The pain of losing her daughter would never fade, but through Lorato, she felt a piece of Nomvelo lived on. She smiled more, walked lighter, and thanked God for giving her a second chance. Together, they began a new chapter, two souls healing in each other's embrace. And as Mama Thandeka tucked Lorato into bed one night, she whispered with tears of gratitude, "Sometimes the love you think you lost returns in the most unexpected way."